Last week I uploaded a video talking about 5 time gaps in the God of War series that Santa Monica could explore in a game or comic. Overall, the video was received well by the community, with the exception of one of the time gaps I mentioned: the time Kratos lived on Mount Olympus as the God of War. And I think most fans were on board with the idea of having Mount Olympus serving as a hub area, similar to the Doom Fortress where you could unlock more rooms as the story progressed. That was fine. The issue came with the perceived redundancy of a game in this time period, because we already have 2 games that covered this time period in the series, Ghost of Sparta and God of War Betrayal. So having a 3rd game wouldn't contribute much to the story. The story of Kratos' descent into madness was already covered in God of War Betrayal. But here's where we as a community have to sit down and discuss God of War Betrayal as a whole, because I've come to realize that the closer we look at this game, the more obvious it becomes that it can no longer be considered canon. And I know that just saying this will fill a lot of people with anger and say something like, how dare you go against what the developers have said? And look, in all honesty, this is a fair question. But I think by the end of this video I will prove to you that having God of War Betrayal as being part of the canon is very problematic. But first, let's quickly go over the story of God of War Betrayal, because I think some people don't even know about this game. If we're going by canon events, the story of God of War Betrayal takes place after Ghost of Sparta, because from the start of the game we see Kratos doing what Athena said in God of War 2, destroying Greek cities. This however doesn't last for long, because not too long after Kratos' arrival, the gods send the multi-eyed beast known as Argos to stop him. Kratos and Argos engage in a couple of fights, but before he can destroy the beast once and for all, a mysterious assassin steps in and kills Argos for him, thus framing Kratos for the death of Argos. What follows is Kratos chasing the mysterious assassin to learn who his master is and why they were trying to turn Olympus against him. Kratos however never catches up with the assassin. Instead, the gods sent the most powerful god in the Greek pantheon to stop him, Syrinx, the lesser known messenger of the gods.
You've got mail.
So Kratos easily kills him, and this act once again enrages the gods, which leads to Zeus' betrayal of Kratos in God of War 2. So what's the issue with the story then? On the surface, it just seems like another story bridging the events of God of War 1 and God of War 2. Well, the problem comes in with the events that the story used to tell this story. A lot of details in this story can't be considered canon anymore, because God of War Betrayal was written with the idea of being the first game in a trilogy of God of War mobile games. This is something the director of God of War Betrayal confirmed in a YouTube comment section, where he explained that the core idea of the mobile trilogy was to tell the story of Kratos' brother who was on a mission to get revenge and power. And as I'm sure you guessed it, Kratos' brother in this story was none other than the mysterious assassin. This is why one of the Spartans points out that the person who killed Argos also had the same mark on his chest. But because the sequels for God of War Betrayal were never made, this story's setup went nowhere. Deimos' story was changed years later in Ghost of Sparta, where instead we're told that Deimos had been kept in the realm of the dead since the day Ares captured him when he was a child. But hold on a minute, this doesn't necessarily mean the events of Betrayal and God of War Ghost of Sparta contradict each other. After all, a popular fan theory is that after Deimos was imprisoned, the gods still used him to do their bidding, very similar to how Olympus used Kratos. Maybe we can save Betrayal's canonicity by saying that Thanatos had sent Deimos to frame Kratos, right? Actually, no, because if we're going by canon events, God of War Betrayal takes place after Ghost of Sparta. So Thanatos couldn't have been the one to send Deimos, and also Deimos couldn't have gone because he was a little busy being dead, you know? Literally, you cannot have these 2 stories side by side. They contradict each other every step of the way. And it doesn't just contradict the games, but it also changes the lore surrounding some established characters. Because at one point in Betrayal, Kratos begins to suspect that Hades is the assassin's master. He never makes this connection to Zeus, Poseidon, or even Hera. This is because the writers were once again setting up Hades as the true villain of this trilogy. This is why the director of Betrayal says that at the end of the mobile trilogy, Kratos' family would have been burned to death with the fires of Hades. It seems like Hades in this story had his own schemes that Olympus wasn't aware of. I speculate that in this cancelled story, Hades, much like Ares, was trying to dethrone Zeus as the king of the gods, and he too was in the search for the marked warrior. Ares thought the marked warrior was Kratos, and Hades thought the marked warrior was his brother Deimos. But this is something I can't prove, so take it with a grain of salt. Now, this idea of having Hades be the master of Kratos' brother didn't disappear completely, because years later they would once again try to use this concept in the original story of God of War 3, where you would be able to find Deimos in the underworld, right where Hades lived. So yeah, we are now deep into the archives of Santa Monica CAD content. Not only was the mobile trilogy cancelled, but Santa Monica also tried to use some of those concepts in God of War 3, which were also changed to the story we have today. The whole thing with Deimos being in God of War 3 is really interesting. If you want to learn more about this lost chapter in the series, make sure to click on this link. But for the purposes of today's video, what you need to know is that it's impossible to consider God of War Betrayal as being part of the canon. There are just too many moments in that story that are setups for a cancelled trilogy. And I could tell that at one point Santa Monica thought the same thing. Remember Argos? Well, there's a concept art for this character in the art book of God of War 3, which tells us that during the development of God of War 3, Santa Monica felt comfortable enough to use Argos again, despite having died many years before. This should be enough to say that Santa Monica no longer considers God of War Betrayal as being part of the canon. And if they don't, why should we? God of War Betrayal will sadly be forgotten by all, forever marked as the unwelcome outsider of the God of War series. But perhaps there is a way to save God of War Betrayal. I think people see the job of a writer as consisting of only writing good arcs for characters and fleshing out the themes they want to tackle in their stories. And those are definitely part of the job. But when it comes to writing for franchises that have been around for many years, part of the job is also to iron out details within the stories that seem to contradict each other. This is something Hideo Kojima did with the Phantom Pain, where he managed to link the story of Phantom Pain with the almost forgotten NES Metal Gear game. I'm not going to explain how he did it because I'm not very knowledgeable about this series, and I also don't want to spoil it for Cesty. But what I'm trying to say is that if the writers wanted to, they could still save Betrayal. Because when you really look at it, the only thing they need to retcon is the identity of the assassin. Yes, originally it was going to be Deimos, and Hades was probably his master. But these are things that haven't been confirmed in the story. Santa Monica still has room to use them in the future. The real question is, will they ever feel the need to save Betrayal? And for that question, I really don't know what to say. Because if we're being honest, God of War Betrayal is not a game in the series that fans play again and again. Chances are most fans haven't played it, and the ones that did only played it once and never plan to play it again. And we also have Ghost of Sparta, which in my opinion does a better job at bridging the events of God of War 1 and God of War 2. So I really can't see the writers at Santa Monica sitting around a table and discussing how they're going to save Betrayal. Chances are that this video is currently underperforming because not a lot of fans care about God of War Betrayal. There are only a handful of us who find this topic interesting, and still talk about it to this day. So why should Santa Monica derail their current plans to fix a game that no one even plays? The only way this could happen is if at one point they tell a time-traveling story where either Kratos or Atreus goes back in time, and for whatever reason they have to disguise themselves as the assassin and accidentally end up killing Argos, creating a classic bootstraps paradox. This is the only way I can see them addressing the mystery of the assassin. But as it stands right now, given the information the director of the game has shared with us, it's really difficult to see Betrayal as being part of the canon. Maybe one day this won't be the case, but for the time being, Betrayal sadly doesn't have much importance. But let me know what you think about this topic. Do you think there's a way to make God of War Betrayal canon without having to use time travel? Or do you think we should just forget about this game completely? Whatever your thoughts and theories are, make sure to leave them in the comments section below. Now as always, I want to give a big thanks to all of my members and Patreon subscribers for supporting the channel monthly. I know I always say this, but working on YouTube is very unreliable, so having this group of fans that support the channel continuously really means a lot. So from the bottom of my heart guys, thank you. I would also like to thank everyone who likes and shares my videos. I know it doesn't seem like much, but trust me, it really does help. And with that said, thanks for watching, and remember, go forth in the name of Olympus.